Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Hollywood Breaks. It's good to be with you on this Friday morning. And as always, Keith, good to see you on this Friday morning. I see that you have changed out your background
Yes,
for us there.
yes. This was probably going to be the backdrop moving forward. Unfortunately, we have entered into the wet and chilly fall season here in Philadelphia, so I don't think I'll be outside much longer. But you do get treated to my posters. This is the poster from Taken, the original Taken that is behind me. So I don't recall the vendor that created this. I believe it was Ignition, but don't quote me on that. But
All right, we won't. From now on, Keith, we have high expectations that you're going to know who the designer of the movie posters are.
Yeah, I'll make next time. I'll make sure I do the due diligence of getting all the data on who designed it and all that kind of stuff.
What I love that campaign, by the way.
Yeah.
The quote that's on the poster, obviously a big part of the trailers and the overall scene.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun campaign to work on, and once we knew that speech was as important and viral as it ended up being, it was really just a linchpin for the campaign. It was a really fun one to work on because we also released it on Super Bowl Sunday, or Super Bowl weekend, I should say, and everyone was like, "You're nuts! Why would you ever release a male-driven film on Super Bowl Sunday?" Well, it turns out people do want to go see movies on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, go figure.
So that turned out to be great. We made two other ones after this, and I would argue that we basically redefined Liam Neeson's career because he basically has been remaking Taken
for
10 years.
Right.
So, I take pride in that because, it was a fun movie to work on, and, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I love the way that the three-part series that you did in the commercials, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, that was something that, was relatively innovative when it came out. So we basically broke up a 90-second spot into three 30-second spots. And it was like daughter gets taken, phone call, and then sort of like a 30-second with an action montage with Liam kicking ass. And it was in the same block. So you basically had a commercial and then a bit of the show and then another commercial and a bit of the show and then another commercial. So, our head of media at the time, Julie Rieger, really kind of worked some magic to get that to happen, and it actually paid off really well for us.
Yeah, imagine that, chapters of a movie playing out in commercial breaks. Pretty cool.
And of course, this is back to people actually watching TV. So
yeah, which is
TV spots. So
I swear it's like the big conversation we're always having is just that the distribution is changing so much that even marketing has to change and keep up with it.
Yep.
And 30-second spots, as we keep pointing out, really aren't very relevant. Maybe on an HGTV or a Lifetime network or something like that, if you were releasing some for that demographic, that's still relevant. But most people's cases, we're consuming content in so many different areas, especially pandemic, post-pandemic situations are all going to change the rules. So I think the marketing people, as we keep talking about, have a lot ahead of them. Hey, I want to be, as we dive into this week, I actually want to kind of pick up on a small topic first, and then I have this bigger kind of question about the Disney reorg. But this week, or I guess recently, I don't know if this week or not, but Amazon picked up Coming to America, the sequel, and they picked it up before it was released. So this is not a move where Amazon is just like picking up a film and giving it a new audience or a play out audience for a long tail. They're actually grabbing a first run release and putting that on their platform. It's not unusual for them. They've obviously been playing this game for a while, but to scoop something up for Paramount, I wonder what that means for Paramount. Do you have a sense of like, is Paramount cash flow crunched? Are they just looking to release some information? I know they had the new CEO and they're doing some new things with the reorg, but there is something happening with Paramount where they've yet again dumped another piece of content to another platform.
They most recently, they also sold Without Remorse, which was a not Jack Ryan, but a Tom Clancy universe film with Michael B. Jordan. They also, I believe, sold that to Amazon as well, which strategically makes sense for Amazon because they have Jack Ryan in the show.
Yeah.
And then now this, which I read some places reportedly the deal was worth almost $125 million, which is just mind-boggling.
Wow. Yeah.
But given all of this, I think a lot of it is, some of it is a cash flow. I think there might be a cash flow issue. I mean, obviously, Paramount is one of those studios that does not have a streaming service at the moment. They have CBS All Access, but it doesn't really fit with the whole Paramount. I mean, they could farm it off, but if they were to do that, then okay, it would make sense. But at the same time, it's like the fact that they sold it to Amazon means that there might be a cash flow problem. You know, Sony, there are two studios that sort of don't have the streaming service that they can just move their releases onto, are Paramount and Sony. Sony did have their Xbox 360 stuff, not Xbox, but PlayStation, but they kind of shut that down. So they don't really have anything. So I think the leadership at Sony made a decision early on to just bump everything to 2021, not even try to play the game of let's just keep pushing and see what happens with the pandemic. They pretty much bumped everything to 2021, which means they didn't spend any money. They spent no money on media buys. Everything just got shifted, which I think saved them a lot of money in the long run, which is why you don't see them really selling off a lot of their releases. Paramount, however, has sort of been in a reimagination phase for the last 3 or 4, a rebuilding after post-Brad Gray. And I think what they're trying to do, because right before the pandemic, they were about to release The Quiet Place 2, which was going to be a huge hit for them. And unfortunately, they had to push it. And they spent a bulk of the media. So that was something that they had to take into consideration. And they had to push Top Gun 2 to next summer. So that was another big movie they were expecting to do quite well. So I think a lot of this is, you know, we just need a little bit of cash flow to keep us sustained until the things start to quiet down with the pandemic. And then, you know, until CBS All Access really rebrands as Paramount Plus, which is the plan, I think that's probably, then you'll start seeing some of the Paramount movies start shifting over to there.
Gosh, I didn't really consider, I like what you're thinking. I didn't really consider how the strategy played itself out, because I do remember the whole Top Gun Maverick really being pushed before the pandemic, and even part of it, they were some strategy not, and I almost like think they lost their bet, right? I mean, they basically pushed that. I know Quiet Place 2 saw some posters or some billboards going up in Hollywood Boulevard, or Sunset Boulevard early on. So a lot of those early gambles they made, this is maybe the repercussions of that. And Coming to America 2, I don't know what the play out was going to be for that. Maybe that's like Bill and Ted's latest thing too. Like there is just some of these films that could fit in a regular film season and kind of make some off-season bets. But as a full drive people into the movie theater audience, Coming to America 2 is not going to be the new standard for driving people to get into the theater again.
No,
so to ditch that earlier, let Amazon buy it, especially if they're going to make under 25 million and get through the season.
Yep.
You'd wonder what their overall profits would be after promotion anyway on a film like that. They might have cleared the assets.
You know that Eddie Murphy has Eddie. Like I know him personally, Eddie.
Yeah, good old Eddie.
Eddie Murphy.
And Arsenio.
Yeah, Eddie and Arsenio. You know, we hang on the weekends. He obviously probably has a pretty healthy back end. So I can imagine that they would have to clear quite a healthy box office to even break even. So I think that's partially why, you know, another reason that kind of drove this sale. Again, just sort of cover their assets a little bit. And, you know, CBS is also a part of Viacom now. They've rejoined together. So, you know, the drop in sort of advertising revenue is affecting the company as a whole.
Sure.
So I think this, again, plays into that factor of sort of, you know, we need a little bit of cash to kind of help stabilize things a little bit in this crazy market.
Well, maybe not the greatest segue from one topic to the other, but it does kind of play together in this idea of Disney's reorg that just happened. I find it so interesting that Disney is kind of playing the cards, or separating out the cards in a different way, and separating distribution from content, and actually leaving one strategy of the where it's going to play. So if it's going to be theatrical, OTT, television channel, whatever their distribution is going to be, it's going to be a separate category. And the way they restack their players and they restack their executives is going to give a different priority to the content creators and the distributors. And I would even say probably to the marketers when all of it's said and done. Why don't you explain what the deal is? And then I have a question for you about how that's going to affect marketing.
Sure. Bob Chapek, the new CEO of Disney, he announced this week that they are basically separating distribution decisions from the content creators. So he basically created three big content makers. He has the film studios, which is overseen by Alan Bergman and Alan Horn. I guess they call it the general entertainment, which is which is like ABC, 20th Century TV, which is overseen by Peter Rice, a former 20th Century Fox executive. And then ESPN Plus in the sports, which is overseen by a gentleman whose name escapes me at the moment. But so they are basically they're just going to create content. And this new like entertainment and media division is basically, which is now headed up by a gentleman by the name of Kareem Daniel, is going to really kind of take a look at the landscape and figure out where these pieces can potentially, be monetized the best. So it really is again, like I said, it's separating the distribution from the content creation, which is not something that's really happened in the past. Like, speaking from my theatrical experience at 20th Century Fox, distribution was a big part of how our strategy, like dating, when you were premiering a first trailer, all that kind of factored into distribution. So that's all sort of been shifted now towards this new division. And I think a lot of this is what the other sort of big players like NBC, Universal, and Warner Media are starting to do as well. They don't necessarily have a person whose sole charge is to sort of figure out the distribution channels. But, they're making the moves. NBC Universal recently promoted somebody who's going to oversee basically all the advertising and sales. So it's sort of that same model where everything's going to live in one spot versus each little division having their own sort of sales team and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's so interesting because one, it almost like you obviously need it, and those silos. You always wondered, working in the industry segments that we've worked in, if those silos were beneficial anyway. Right. I remember inside the NBC Universal bubble, they would have this what they call it, the Golden
Symphony.
That's a Gold Symphony, right? Where everything from theme parks to theatrical television, everything, even their OTT platforms, all had to synchronize within one promotion. But it's a big lift for a studio to have to do that over and over and over again. They can only basically do 4 a year, maybe 1 a quarter, right? And this kind of a model, you can recognize like the content makers, and the priority of content really is to get the demographic, the viewership up, right? The demographic moving forward to watch the content, and obviously commercialize that so they can make the content and sell the tickets, what have you. But then to be able to really create that Gold Symphony, the Gold Symphony of the NBC Universal world, globally across all platforms, all times, right? And to create a different strategy for OTT. By the way, the guy's name is James Pitaro, is the ESPN. Okay. Yeah. But to separate out those silos in such a way for Disney allows each one to focus on what their demographic is, probably do some strategy or testing or whatever within each of those content platforms. But I wonder if Disney is recognizing maybe or hedging their bets for future shutdowns like COVID is doing, and saying, wow, maybe the economy in the world has changed so much, we have to be on our toes. So we're not going to lock things down into certain distribution so early that we can't pivot later on and go OTT. Because clearly something like Mulan was a win for them to do that shift. They probably don't want to play the politics for every movie distribution in the future. If they think like, well, we'll do better on Disney Plus than this, they don't want to play politics after the fact. They want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah, and it's also a relationship issue, I think, in a lot of ways, because, when filmmakers come to the studio, they're expecting a theatrical release. And then if they're told midstream, oh, we're shipping this to Disney Plus, because of the pandemic, it's sort of like, wait, what? So sort of setting that relationship, that expectation up earlier on, I think is going to be helpful as well. And Bob also pointed out, the CEO, that this is, because everyone was like, well, this is a major reorg. And he's like, well, it is, but at the same time, this is not really. I mean, we've kind of been thinking about this, and the pandemic has kind of forced our hand, because viewers and consumers are changing their habits rapidly, and we have to respond to that. And they want, I mean, this is the age-old problem, and as we've been talking about, a theme of this podcast is basically, you know, all the things that are happening in the industry have been sort of issues that have been around, but the pandemic just forced them to the forefront. And this is a definitely example of that. And I think you can see that, you know, they recognize now that these consumers, and we've been saying this ad nauseum, they want it where they want it, when they want it, and how they want it. And they sort of now recognizing that this is the new reality. You can't dictate to people as much as you thought you used to be able to. The theatrical model was holding on to that whole, like, no, we're going to tell you where you have to see it and when you have to see it and how you have to see it. And they're one of the last sort of bastions in the entertainment space that were holding like death grip onto that. And now it's sort of, they don't have that option anymore. Now they really have to respond to where their consumers are. And I think this is Disney's recognition that is happening. And because they have such recognizable brands, I think they recognize that they have the sort of the people in place that can sort of, they can separate out the distribution decisions because they have all that information at their fingertips.
Yeah, it's felt like the film distribution has thought of themselves as the top of the food pyramid for so many years that they have called all the shots. And really the play out, and as we've said in the past, the deals that people make of the long tail portion of the film distribution, really you can make all your money up front and then continue to make money on different platforms. Viewership and viewing platforms now has changed everything. And I have to imagine it's hard for the movie players to have to shift into such a way of saying, well, I know you want people to go to the theaters, but in reality, people are going to watch it on TV first, to go to the movie theater to be with their friends and do something else. And the movie theater experience has already changed so much over the years, and it's going to have to change now to tip things over. Let's talk about marketing. Here's the observation I'm making. When we teach Show Launcher at RevThink, what we teach is the reverse engineering your content. We tell people you have to understand why you're making the content, who that content is for, and then the who determines where the distribution is for that content, and then you decide what to make. Now we also know like the ideas of content come first, but really like, you know, what's the final cut going to look like? What's it going to look like is that last piece, right? To know what the piece item is. What Disney seems to be doing is really kind of following that model sooner than later too, and just saying where now is becoming more important, a bigger player than just the third leg of this, the third stage of a regular distribution model. They're saying, hey, we should have this where conversation as soon as the conversation is we're saying why we're making it and who we're making it for. We should be saying where it's that early in the game. And each platform has to have its own where strategy. My hope is that maybe this does refocus theaters a little bit and put some information out there and some strategy of how to get people in the theaters, because they're going to make some specific content for theaters specifically and for OTT specifically and mix them around. So that's my observation. The question is how does this change marketing? Holy cow. Like, think about all those silos that are now going to have to become like a hub really for marketing, right?
I mean, that's my biggest question through all of this is, what does this mean for the marketing divisions at each of these now content creators? Because, you know, back in the day when the studios were sort of the standalones and the film television studios, and they all have their fully robust marketing teams with research and promo people. And now with this sort of new division, and he's also going to oversee advertising and sales, it seems like that may shift things, that marketing might just become one big hub under Kareem Daniels' division now. And, you know, depending on where it ends up going, you know, that division will then handle any sort of the marketing materials, and you'll just have one hub. Because in my mind, this sort of, if it's just Kareem's group making the decision of where it goes, you're not really saving a ton of money, which I think in the long run is also a plan of the way that Disney's looking at it, is how do we capture savings with this new sort of this new division? And one way is you combine all the marketing teams and you basically make one big marketing hub that cuts all the trailers, does some of the TV spots, because let's be honest, you're not doing a lot of TV spots and theatrical campaigns anymore. It's really just about the trailer. And the other interesting thing is Disney Plus has a ton of data on all these consumers, what they're watching, when they're watching, how many, is it a family, is it a single subscriber? They have all that information at their fingertips. So that is the immense value right now for content creators and distributors, is that data. And studios have been bending over backwards trying to figure out a way to how to capture that data. Because, you know, you go to a theater and you buy a ticket, you're not capturing any data on that person. You're not capturing their, you know, where they live, how many times they go to the movies. It's just, you're losing all that. Whereas with the streaming, you get all that data. And Disney has a lot of that data at their fingertips, not just from Disney Plus, but the parks. So they have all this data, and it's interesting that to see if that's where the focus is going to be. I know that the studio themselves have a internal agency, or I guess you could call it vendor, called the Hive, which cuts a lot of their material. And one wonders if now the Hive is basically going to be transmitted over to Kareem's group and sort of just start cutting materials for all these content creators and get the creative to focus solely on the content creation and not necessarily the marketing and strategy and all that stuff.
Yeah, he's a really interesting choice.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know if that's definitely what's going to happen, but I think that's definitely something I think that might be on the immediate horizon.
No, and I'm processing with you, because I think the choice of using him, you know, his executive positions before this were all within the Disney family. I mean, he basically has climbed the Disney ladder. And I mean, he was chief of staff for Bob Iger, I think. Like, he was in the CEO office for years, but he was also like consumer product goods and games. So I do believe he has like his hands on some kind of data or data source that he knows how to read and has clearly marketed well. And they're leveraging that ability back into the content division. Exactly. And often, again, like, I feel like those were secondary sources, and those secondary sources for now have become primary sources of marketing needs and strategies. And now they're informing the content creators. If I'm a content creator today, by the way, I have to be thinking about my show really being a product, right? It's something that is absolutely has to be sold to eyeballs to get certain results. And you're not just competing out there with other television shows, other films, even just, you know, other forms of content. If it's in the audio and media world, really it gets into all of the viewing time that we've talked about, and the distractions that viewers have when it comes to just the TikTok videos of the world, the games and the billions of hours people are watching in games, and what YouTube does to distract viewers into all the different categories as well. The competition has gotten so fierce for people's eyeballs that you can't just be only in one discipline of the industry anymore to do it. And I wonder if Disney kind of recognized that in Kareem. He's coming from a very different background, different eyes and ears. And I would bet some of his years he spent in the CEO office, the chief of staff, gave him some sense of what that strategy is and how it plays out in these divisions. Be interesting to see. I'm going to guess, like, I'm also a trailer editor or running a trailer company today. I'm going to have to start thinking about branching myself out to almost being like an agency, right? Start looking into an agency type strategy on viewership, data, results, measuring those results. It can't just be the silly test audiences they used to do in Las Vegas back in our day. They're going to have to start looking at some hardcore data to. Yeah,
I mean, the research area is going to have to change completely, particularly sort of in a theatrical space, because the traditional theatrical way of doing research was you did screenings, you had questionnaires, you had tracking, but sort of that's all going to change now because of the fact that it's not just about theatrical experience anymore. It's just not. Like, you have to be able to sort of look at the data from start to finish in terms of determining where the best place to release it, when to release it, and all those things are all going to come into play. And I think, to your point, I think Kareem Daniel is going to have access to a lot of that data, whereas sort of theatrical research can sometimes be just sort of guesswork and looking at the numbers and saying, well, here's what you need to do. And, well, that doesn't exist in the movie. And it's like, okay, well, then you got to make it up. And it's like, okay, great.
Right.
I think those days are kind of like, those days are gone. So I think you're going to see a shift in sort of how data is managed and how it's handled and how it's used to basically find the best audience for every piece of content.
Yeah, and if you're competing with NBC Universal, they obviously have so much information at their exposure, owning the cable networks and the data structure there. I think these major data players are coming into play. Amazon, it's become a content, is it becoming obviously an entertainment partner? They are all about data. There's nothing else that is Amazon besides data. And Apple TV or the Apple world is coming this way. So I think Google's smart. They're staying out of it because they want to be hit up as the monopoly that they are. They want to float back to the backside so everyone forgets that they're how important they are and all the influence that they have, and staying out of it. But we really are watching, as we're always kind of pointing out, these big shifts that are happening. And I mean, I'll just say week by week, it's awesome. Whatever we're doing to create content for our show, we don't have to do much. We just have to wait 7 days and Disney and then the world shifts again. Yeah.
Moment.
I swear we have like a list of things that we wanted to cover, and those things keep being pushed back by the next thing that happens in the 7-day period. We have to stop doing research, just let it come to our doorstep.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. I think that there's an important thing to be watching as the items play out. I'm curious to see what Paramount's going to do. I do think there's something happening at Sony. We're going to watch some merger happen there, but we're also, again, just watching the evolution of these big players.
Yeah, and I think there is going to be an investor day in December. Walt Disney's going to the company's going to put on a big investor day, and I think that will give us a real peek into how this new structure is going to work for them, and how all these divisions are going to play, and what's going to be underneath the Kareem Daniel umbrella and what isn't. So I think that'll be a real eye-opening presentation for sure.
That's really great. Yeah, maybe this is a precursor for that.
Yep.
Well, Keith, once again, thanks for the week and paying attention to these trends. I know that we're going to get some people coming up soon. What I want is to hear is your friends from Amazon. I'd love to get them on here because I'm curious of what this strategy is that they're doing. You're holding your breath, so
I'll bust out my old school Rolodex and see what I can find for you.
Flip through that thing, see if we can find some people. I'd just love to get some inside scoop if there is anything on how Amazon plays out, because their practice, people in the industry know this, that their studio practice is very different. They're very efficient in a lot of ways, but then some of these media buys seem to have some kind of long tail structure that are different than other studios are looking at. So they're doing something very different with their numbers and their strategy internally. It'd be cool to get some thought leadership in that conversation.
See what I can do.
All right. Well, then, again, until next week, thanks, Keith, for joining us. We'd like to thank Lydia and Ethan for their help in what they do behind the scenes. Go Social and their team. Thank you for all that you're doing, getting our graphics going. Of course, the team at RevThink for being our supporters, and viewers like you. We couldn't do this without you. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to this channel. We're going to be making more content in the next few weeks, and we'd love for you to be part of it. So subscribe here to get our latest information and content we have going on. Keith and I are working hard behind the scenes. We have a couple of players and big conversations we have coming up in the future. So subscribe and stay on our email channel that way. Keith, I'll see you next week. Thanks for another great week. And thank you all for watching.
And a new poster. Woohoo!
And a new poster.